Oh, go ahead.
I'm just
You guys for joining us on our Forum of Active Transportation. Just as a reminder, everyone is muted and when they enter. We ask that you save all comments and questions for the end. If you have anything during, please feel free to use the chat box. And at the end, we'll call on people for questions and we'll ask you to unmute at that time. So just giving you a rundown of our agenda, we will have our typical SMTC staff updates about some of the projects that we're working on right now, and some of the upcoming studies that we're going to be working on. We'll be asking our member agencies to give any updates that they may have related to bike and ped programs. And then we have Ann Savage, the executive director of the New York Bicycle Coalition, here with us today. She's going to give us kind of a statewide perspective on some of the things that her group is helping with advocacy for, and some of the different activities that they've been involved with, and things that they're seeing kind of around the state, and maybe things that we should be aware of here and kind of trying to learn from. We'll follow that up with our Q&A discussion. Again, if you have questions during it, please feel free to use the chat. We'll either answer them as we go, or we'll circle back with them depending on how the timing allows. And then we'll just do a brief closing and talk about, see if there's any ideas for our next topic of conversation. Just as a reminder, we do ask that all comments and questions be respectful. We're trying to make sure this is a productive learning activity for everyone and an engaging place for people to join. So please read through some of these conduct ideas. They're also available on our website, just for any future reference. So jumping into our staff updates, we're working on a lot of different projects right now. Some of them are wrapping up. Some of them are just kind of beginning. So we'll kind of take a look through some of these.
Recording in progress.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, my apologies.
No, you're good. I should have caught that.
No, it's all good.
So some of the studies that we're currently kind of wrapping up, Brewerton Trail Feasibility Assessment. This was acknowledged as complete at our last SMTC Policy Committee in October. This included 2 tech memos, one on existing conditions and one on options for improvements. Staff identified a bicycle and pedestrian network that links Brewerton's outer neighborhoods with its riverfront and business district. And they identified an off-road trail option to connect Brewerton to the Micron site. That's utilizing a right-of-way that's owned by National Grid, and working with National Grid on understanding their requirements for utilizing their paths as trailways. The downtown parking wayfinding and signage guide, while it's mostly geared towards identifying parking facilities for cars, we are focusing a section of it on identifying the need for more bicycle parking throughout downtown, including updating our inventory on bike racks, and looking for spaces that are currently underserved. That right now has a final draft report out to its study advisory committee members, and that will be presented at our next policy and planning committees. The villages of Manoa, Fayetteville, and Manlius Bicycle and Pedestrian Connection Study. Right now there is the draft file report that is complete. This will be presented at our upcoming planning and policy committees, and that looked at on-road facilities within the town of Manlius. For some ongoing projects, we have our Route 57 Complete Street Study. The first public meeting was held in November to introduce the project to the public and seek input and issues on issues and opportunities. There is a website right now if you want to go to it and kind of engage with the process through there. The consultant is currently developing some preliminary improvements with a second round of public involvement coming this summer, and the study should be wrapped up later this summer. Safe routes to school support for Onondaga County. The study is scoped to guide 1 to 2 school communities through a safe routes to school project. Right now they have contacted Chestnut Hill and elementary and middle schools. They'll be working closely with those school communities on developing using them as a kind of test pilot for the program. SMTC staff met with principals and hosted a workshop with PTO to identify issues and opportunities for those walking and biking to school. They're creating a parent and student survey to obtain feedback at the moment. For community streets, we are in our year 2 for that program. Applications closed on January 15th. We just had a meeting today to meet with the city of Syracuse, County Health, and Adapt CNY to review project proposals, and we'll be moving forward with at least 2 projects this summer to install some temporary changes to our roadways. Some newer projects are really just getting off the ground. There's a Safe Streets for All action plan with Onondaga County. I know that's currently being prepared to go out for RFP, I believe. Reconnecting Communities pilot program. The city of Syracuse has a $500,000 grant for this. They've signed on Stantec as the consulting agency, and we've really just started that project. It's a quick timeline for that project. It'll be wrapped up in the fall of 2025. Trying to get some recommendations into the state before they really get started on that part of the 81 project. SMTC staff has assisted in scope development RFP and will help manage the consultants for both of these projects. All right, now we'd like to turn it over to our member agencies for any updates that they may have. I know Chris Rober for the county said that he has to jump off at 4, so I want to make sure that if there's anything that the county wants to kind of highlight, we'd like to give you the opportunity right now.
Yeah, no, thank you, Thomas. I appreciate that. No, I just wanted to update folks on the last part of the Loop the Lake Trail. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, this project is complicated. Essentially, the limits are from Murphy's Island behind the mall. Many of you may know we built with local funds. We built the Murphy's Island Trail, which extends out onto Murphy's Island. But we want to pick up from that point and head towards the village of Liverpool by going over the CSX railroad tracks and over Lake Creek, and work our way up along the Parkway, using some of the green space there. And actually, in some areas that we run out of green space, so we have to use the shoulder of the road, which will install some barrier. But we eventually want to make it up past the Butterfly Garden, cross over Bloody Brook, and connect to the existing trail / parking lot that exists there. So it's a federally funded project, and what comes with that is a lot of requirements to meet. So we're working through that now. We're in preliminary design, but our hope is to do the project in 2 phases. Phase 1 would be what I call the low-hanging fruit from Bloody Brook down to almost just beyond the railroad bridge. We can actually get under there, and we'll get south of the railroad bridge probably by a half a mile or so. That's phase 1, and phase 2 would be from that point up over CSX and onto Murphy's Island. Our hope is phase 1 would be constructed in 27, and then the harder, more difficult project would be constructed in 28. So that's sort of the timeline and the brief, quick summary on that.
Okay. I mean, that's great. That's best update I've heard on that so far. So I'm excited to hear that. All right. Let's see. Julie for NISDOT, would you like to unmute or have to?
Sure. Okay. You guys should be able to hear me all right now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I don't have a ton of updates, mostly on the policy end for what we're working on at state. We're still working on our active transportation strategic plan. That was targeted to have like a phase 1 done later this winter. This was mostly goal setting and visioning type stuff. And that feeds into our NISDOT transportation master plan, which includes some of the stuff from the active transportation strategic plan. And it'll also look at other modes of travel. And I think the next big thing that would kind of be relevant to this group after the active transportation plan, we'll be working on the ADA transition plan. That's where we'll review our state-owned facilities to inventory and take note of where we have not meeting ADA compliance, and coming up with plans to work toward updating those facilities. This is kind of a federal requirement for us. And I guess just something to add, we're kind of closely watching the policy and funding situation in Washington, DC. It's been on our minds a lot the last couple weeks. If you've been following the news, there's been a lot of executive orders that appear to alter policy and funding access for different federal agencies. And we at the NISDOT, we get a lot of transportation funding coming down from federal highways and federal transit, and I'm sure SMTC is looking at that too. And sorry about that. So there's just a lot of news on that recently. Monday we had a general pause on federal funding that was rescinded yesterday late. So we're kind of waiting to see where that goes and for clarification on certain targeted programs that were called out in the executive orders. Not so relevant to this group, but electric vehicle infrastructure and some things that might affect some of the projects we're working on for active transportation would be discretionary grant programs something might come on. So we're waiting to see where that goes. So stay tuned.
Yep, that's definitely been something that we've been at least trying to stay on top of a little bit, but hard to know exactly what's happening at any given time, it feels like.
Yeah, a lot going on.
Yeah, a lot changing day to day immediately, so that'll be fun.
All right, thanks.
Bren?
Hi there. So I'm Bren Dice from Centro. For those of you who don't know me, we consider all of our customers to be pedestrians at the very least, but also bike riders. So just wanted to give you some updates as to general Centro stuff. And I think you guys are going to be excited about some of these updates. As you know, our BRT system is moving forward. That's our bus rapid transit, and we are planning that as we speak. Those parts are moving forward. But we really looked at, if we have a 12 to 15 minute service on 2 lines across the city, but when you get to the hub, you still have to wait 40 minutes for other lines of service to catch up. It's not as efficient. So we really felt like an important element in our BRT system was a system redesign. A lot of you on this call probably, are super familiar with what a system redesign means, but we've also decided that the general public doesn't all know what that means, doesn't all know that means we're looking at efficiency and making our entire system better. So we're going to call it Better Bus. So you're going to start hearing the buzz around town from Centro that we're building a better bus system. And that's our system redesign. So if you haven't seen our website yet, we have a page dedicated to, a couple pages dedicated to this system redesign. So if you go to centro.org/Better Bus Onondaga, that will take you right into our consultant page, which will give you a ton of information. So you'll want to check it out. It gives a lot of analyses as to what we're looking at and how we're going to determine transit propensity, where what size bus is best suited, right? So we're looking at, obviously we know where BRT is best suited. So where are our 40-foot buses best suited? How about on demand? Where do the pedestrian first and last mile elements come in? And so we're looking at all of that. Again, it's Better Bus Onondaga, centro.org/Better Bus Onondaga. But if you go to Centro, you'll see it at the top and you can click right to it that way too. So next week, we've got a ton of public outreach. This is our first phase of public outreach for the system redesign. Again, the Better Bus system. I'm going to intermix those phrases, and I need to start calling it Better Bus all the time. But our public outreach starts on Tuesday, and you can see, if you click on Get Involved, you can see an entire page of upcoming events next week. We have, I think, between internal and external, we have about 10 or 12, maybe more than that, meetings next week. So lots of outreach and super exciting. We will be at the Cecil Center on Midland on Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday the 4th. On Wednesday the 5th, we'll be at Salt City Market at the lunch hour, and then at North Syracuse Junior High School in the evening from 3:30 to 6:30. On Thursday the 6th, we'll do the lunch hour at Fairmont Community Library and will be at Interfaith Works from 3:30 to 5:30. On the 7th, which is Friday, we'll be at East Syracuse Village Hall from 11:30 to 1:30, and we'll be at Destiny USA from 4:30 to 6:30. So again, you didn't need to write any of that down because you can go right to the website and see all of that information. But you do want to come out, and I know I'm going to see some of the same faces that I'm looking at now at our outreach next week. Again, we're going to be, it's an open house presentation, so there will be no lecture. There will be a lot of stations, a lot of conversations. We'll have questions and show you what we've done so far with our consultant, and then get your feedback so that we can keep moving this process forward. Again, the timeline, we're looking at 2026 for our system redesign. So that means our entire system will be new out on the road in 2026. And then BRT will add in 2027. And that's just so that we are coordinated and that our funding opportunities line up correctly. So BRT will be added into our system in 2027, and we'll have a whole new system next year in 2026. So I think that's all of it. I know I'm going to see you all next week.
No, we're definitely, I know I was talking with Joey at work here, and we were trying to plan out which one we're going to. Probably is seeing you at Salt City, but we'll see what works out best. And thank you, Joey, for putting the link to Better Bus in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Joey.
And I think I saw Kevin Busa on here somewhere.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough act to follow for sure with Brent. She's got a whole system update, so that's actually really good news for us as a city. So thank you for that, Brent. A couple quick things. I probably will have more information at the next vote meeting for the city. But a couple quick things I really want to focus on today. We are wrapping up the Vision Zero outreach portion. We've done a lot of online mapping. We've held an in-person meeting at Salt City Market. We have over 800 comments on our map online. So we had a lot of really good input. That is open until the end of today, end of tomorrow. So if you have a couple more, you got to go and visit our website and upload those ASAP if you could. We are going to take in all those into consideration. We also are going to have 4 additional meetings. I'm going to put that in the chat right now. Hopefully the formatting kind of kept in there. So we are going to have 4 more Vision Zero meetings. What these are going to be doing is we're going to have little different stations. Come talk to us, come interact with us, come see. The good news is it'll be the same meeting. Don't go to all 4 meetings. So this is just another opportunity. Some are during the day, some are at nighttime. They're in different neighborhoods. They're the same meeting. So try to stop by and visit at least one of them if you could, or you haven't put in 100 comments already online. So a lot of that information we're compiling it now with our consultants, and that project will be wrapping up this springtime. So it's really something it's coming up quick. And we designed it specifically like that so that we can get to work on it as well, right? Like we shouldn't be doing this for years. We should wrap this up and implement some of these items. Another one, I think Tom already mentioned, downtown parking study. There's a big push to get bike racks downtown. So working with that study is going to be key. Another thing, I think at the next meeting, I'll have a lot more information on bike infrastructure projects. We're going to do some more greenways, neighborhood greenways. People are really taking to the speed hump movement here in Syracuse. There was a little pushback at the beginning, but improving both sidewalks, biking, slowing down cars in neighborhoods is kind of a huge push for us this season. So, and then the last thing I will mention that is, I'm trying to say this everywhere I go at this point, but speed enforcement is coming this season. So initially it's going to be the stop arm cameras on our buses. We're going to put those on the buses. So if you're passing buses when the stop arm is up, which you should not be doing, There will be automated enforcement with that. And then hopefully this fall will be more school zone cameras. So every school zone will have a camera in it, and really try to crack down on some of those chronic issues that we're having in school zones.
All right. I mean, I think that's a good amount of stuff to be updating us on, so I appreciate that. A lot of good stuff going on here. I think that's everyone that I know of. Okay. All right. So with that, I'd like to reintroduce our guest speaker for the day. Ann Savage is the Executive Director of New York Bicycle Coalition. And she's here to kind of give us an idea of what else is happening around the state and what her coalition specifically is advocating for, and so in the movement that she's seeing in different communities. So Ann, yep, you're sharing your screen. Good. All right. Oh wait, just got unmute. There you
Unmute,
go.
yeah, thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank you guys for inviting me. I really enjoyed meeting several of you when I was in Syracuse for the Syracuse Urban Collective program a couple of weeks ago. When was that? I don't know. Seems like maybe November. And I love to hear about all the things that are happening in Syracuse, because you guys are doing great work there. And you'll see as I go through my presentation, a lot of things that have already been mentioned here today. Are things that are important, I think, for cyclists and for users of active transportation across the state. So my objective for today is to give you guys a little orientation to NYBC so that you know who we are and what we offer, in part because there's some resources that we offer that you may not be aware of that may be useful for you and your constituencies. And then I will, as mentioned by Thomas, I'm going to share some statewide topics of interest around our advocacy and around speed, which is an issue for everyone. And then I'm going to share a little bit about Albany. I am an Albany resident, so it's the community I know best. And I think you'll find a lot of similarities between what we're doing and what you guys are doing. And then I hope to have an open discussion, because I know I will learn a lot from all of you as well as the other way around. So that's what I'm planning to cover. There are way too many words on this slide. I apologize for the wordy slide, but I feel like a lot of the words on here are really important. Our mission and our goal is to make New York State the safest and most bike-friendly state in the country. We think that means excellent cycling infrastructure, a really vibrant cycling community, and laws that protect and support cyclists, pedestrians, and all vulnerable road users. And that's not just because we like to ride our bikes, which we do. We believe that cycling is not just a hobby or a way to get around. It's a cornerstone of thriving, resilient, connected communities. And if you can serve your cyclists and your pedestrians, you're building a community where people want to live, and that's good for New York State. We are a relatively old not-for-profit. We were founded in 1990. We are the only statewide organization that's focused primarily on cycling. We overlap, obviously, with a number of other organizations, especially Parks and Trails. They work, obviously, on parks and trails for all users, and we focus on safe streets, and we are interested in tourism and recreation, but our more primary objective is around transportation and safe streets, and we work very closely with our friends at Parks and Trails. So our unique role is to unite, inspire, and support the New York cycling community, and to provide a cohesive voice for people who ride bikes across New York. We work for everyone, and we do three separate kinds of things primarily. We do bike safety education, educating cyclists, walkers, and drivers about how we can be safer together. That work is primarily funded through GTSC. We build a strong biking and pedestrian community across New York, and we advocate for regulations, funding, and infrastructure to make streets safer. So I'm going to start by talking about our education work, and I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. I'm happy to slow down at the end. I just don't want to bog down too much in this, but there are resources that we offer that not everyone in the state is aware of. We have a lot of statewide bicycling education topics. We cover a million different topics. This is just a selection of them, everything from like, how does the law work for cyclists? How does the law work for drivers? There's a lot of interest in how does the law work with e-bikes right now, right? There's all these changes. So we have all of these topics and many more covered. You can find them on our website. And we do it in a lot of different modes. We have videos that exist that you can pull on demand. We have some text written things we call safety shorts, which summarize the same information for those of us who are old enough that we read faster than we watch videos, so prefer to just read it. We do have a set of online quizzes, which I think most people find really enjoyable, like test your knowledge. Do you really know what the law is? Those are down right now as we revamp them, but they'll be coming up again later in 2025. We are increasingly active on social media, although, with everything going on in the world, it's a little unclear to me what direction social media is going to be going. So we're sort of watching on that front to see where the audience is. And then we do a lot of advertising and PSAs, and I wanted to call out in particular, can you guys see my mouse? Yeah. So this picture of the little sort of cartoony bike person, that is on a CDTA bus. Our transit authority is the Capital District Transit Authority in Albany, and every single bus has a digital screen on it that they can use to say, oh, here's where the next stop is. And they allow us to use space on that to share our bike safety message. And that is particularly appropriate because CDTA was one of the first in the state to have bikes on every single bus. Bren might be able to know if they were the actual first. I think they may be the first, but I don't want to overcommit. They also, the Transit Authority in Albany also runs the bike share program. It's part of transit in Albany, not a separate thing. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So they're very bike friendly and have been very generous with their space to us. And then importantly, from your perspective, we also have printed materials, which are free. They are produced by us under contract with the GTSC for use statewide. So if you guys are having an event at one of these many millions of tabling events I have just heard about, and you would like to share bike safety education information, we have that and we can send it to you at no cost. So that material all works. The main product is a thing called a pocket guide, which is like maybe a 30-page little booklet about how to be a safe cyclist. And we have that on offer already in English and Spanish, and we expect to be producing an Arabic version later this year. We also do some specific target communities in Albany County and Nassau County, where we have staff who do direct service. Those communities were selected because they have high crash rates and challenging demographics. And we develop partnerships there. We do in-person education, learn to ride events, tabling, however we can get material to people. And we do distribute some safety education and helmets and whatnot there. Another thing we do that would be very pertinent to your community is we do law enforcement training. So we do classes for law enforcement officers. The law enforcement officers are really trying to do the right thing, but the world is changing quick around them, and they're struggling with the same kinds of things we are. Class 1, class 2, class 3, what's an e-bike? What's a moped? How do I do this? What's the law? And so we do a lot of law enforcement training around what are the active transportation devices, how do the laws apply, state trends as well as local trends for active transportation crashes. We help people improve police reports. Police reports for active transportation crashes are notoriously bad, so we try and work with folks to improve that. How they should and should not cite cyclists and drivers. And then sometimes they want to know how they can do better community outreach around cycling, so we help them with that too. That is the end of the section of our program that's really funded directly by GTSC. That's our bike safety education. Now I'm going to shift to the things that we fund through other mechanisms, and that's primarily around community building and advocacy. Community building, our primary community building event is the New York Bike Summit. If you did not get to the New York Bike Summit in October 2024, I am very sorry, because we had a great time. We had 2 days of panelists and keynotes. It was really great. We had about 130 people from across the state join us in Albany. The keynote speaker was Wes Marshall, who wrote this book called Killed by a Traffic Engineer. If you have not read that book, I encourage you to. He is a traffic engineer. He doesn't think they're evil. Do not be offended by the title. It's a really good book and very conversational in tone, easy read. He will be the speaker at the National Bike Summit as well. People keep asking when's the next bike summit, and our plan, we're still working out the details, but our rough plan is that we're moving towards a biennial bike summit in the odd years. So this is an odd year, 2025, but we just had one, and we're not having one this year because it's a lot to put on a bike summit. So our next full bike summit will be in 2027. The intervening even years is when Walk Bike Roll happens. Most of you probably know about Walk Bike Roll, which is the agency-led conference. Last year it was in Binghamton. Next year, 2026, we expect it to be in Sleepy Hollow. That's what it looks like right now, at least. They have not signed on the dotted line, but that's what it looks like. And we're talking with them about doing sort of a bike advocates and cycling pedestrian advocates portion of event just immediately adjacent. So like Walk Bike Roll would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The NYBC part would be like Sunday evening into Monday, something like that. So that will be June of 2026. The other thing we do in terms of community building is we new in 2024 are doing a webinar series. I'm going to talk a lot about the one that's coming up next Tuesday on the 25 mile per hour change. So make a note of that. And we have several more upcoming webinars. We also make ourselves present at partner rides and events. Two big events that we'll be at this year are the Bike 80K Weekender, which I'd like to think of as family camp with bikes. So if you would like to be out with families of all ages in the Adirondacks on your bike, we'll be there and talking about bike safety and bike advocacy. We also partner, as I mentioned, with our friends at Parks and Trails New York, who run the Erie Canal Ride and the Hudson Valley Ride. So we'll be a featured speaker at one of the evening campsite things at those rides. Another community building thing that I'm only going to mention in passing, but it's a good entree to an important topic, is the National Bike Summit. Every year there is a National Bike Summit. It's kind of like the New York Bike Summit. It brings together advocates and agency people from all over the country. I really recommend, if you would like to go, that you try to get there. It is, however, unfortunately fairly pricey. I think the ticket, face value ticket's like $700 or something. So it's not an inexpensive one. Plus you got to get to Washington and all of that. We go because it's part of our advocacy work. We lead the New York State delegation to meet with congressmen and senators around the priorities that get established by the league every single year. So typically those priorities are around increased funding or increased accessibility of funding, also around additional safety issues. Like last year, they were very focused on protection for cyclists and pedestrians on truck undercarriages was a big issue that we were trying to work on, and bike education in schools. As has already been mentioned, 2025 is going to be a very interesting year in the federal administration. So I am quite curious what it's going to be like to be on Capitol Hill in March of 2025. And the reason in particular that I wanted to mention the League of American Bicyclists is that they rank the states every other year in terms of how bike friendly they are. And unfortunately, I have to report that New York is moving in the wrong direction. When they did it in 2022, we were number 13 in the country. And in 2024, we were number 15. So we have moved 2 spots in the wrong direction. And that is primarily because of 2 things, one of which has already been mentioned today. So that's a nice segue for me, which is that we have the oldest bike master plan in the country. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The second one is we do not have what they call a defined safe passing law. Some people call that a 3-foot law. So I'm just going to briefly, too many space bars. I'm going to briefly cover those 2 topics. But when we address those 2, we will be one of the top 10 bike-friendly states in the country, for sure. Because the only thing holding us out of the top 10 is those 2 things. So the first one is the bike, I can click on the trigger here. The bike master plan. We literally have the oldest bike master plan in the country. I dropped that in there, not so that you would read it, but just so you could see the font and the layout and realize, that document looks like it was produced in 1997. Yes, in fact, it was produced in 1997. And there'll be some familiar names in there. Jeff Olson, many of you guys probably know. He was still at DOT at that time, and he was the representative to the Bike Ped Advisory Council when they wrote this plan. So we're in the Wayback Machine here. John Orchid's mentioned there. He's now the lobby guy or advocacy guy for Bike New York. So a lot of these people are still around, but it was going way back. As Julie mentioned, it's going to be replaced by the Active Transportation Strategic Plan. That will be the bike plan, and that is supposed to happen in 2025. Unfortunately for us, of course, they're not going to redo the rankings just because we did our thing. So we will not move up in the rankings until they do the 2026 Bike Friendly America evaluations. That's the timing was just unfortunate on that, but that is what it is. They are still saying, as Julie did, that we're expecting a draft plan soon. They were accepting public comment as recently as December. They did some forums, and I checked with Karen Lorf, who's sort of heading that up, and she said, yes, they still want comments. So if you haven't commented on the bike master plan or the active transportation strategic plan, you should do that. So that's one. Number two, and I'm not going to read all the words, don't panic. There's a lot of words on this slide too, is this question of defined safe passing. Almost every other state in the country has a rule that says drivers have to give cyclists at least so many feet. Most states are 3 feet, so you need to give people a 3 feet buffer. When I say almost all the other states, I mean almost all. We're down to New York and 9 other states, and I've listed them there. You'll see that they're not states that we're normally grouped with, right? We are a very significant outlier among the progressive states and among the northeastern states. We do have a safe distance law in New York, but it is completely vague. It just says safe distance and open to interpretation. We also have a due care process where you are expected not to hit people. That seems like a reasonable position to me, but it's one of my least favorite laws because it does say you shouldn't hit me, but it does say that if you come across a pedestrian, cyclist, or domestic animal upon the roadway, you should give warning by sounding your horn. I would rarely encourage people not to obey the law, but in this case, please do not blow your horn at a cyclist who is in the road. That is not helpful and likely to frighten them and cause an accident. So this section of the law really needs some cleaning up regardless of the defined safe passing, but this is what we have now. We have been trying to get defined safe passing of at least 3 feet passed for 10 years. That's 5 legislative cycles. Most of you probably know that New York runs on a 2-year legislative cycle. The last 2 legislative cycles, it has passed in the Senate, but we have not been able to get it passed in the Assembly. This bill is an education bill. We are not looking to add penalties or increase enforcement. We just want to teach people 3 feet. Just give us 3 feet. This bill includes pedestrians and wheelchair users, which is part of pedestrians in the New York State law, as well as cyclists. And our neighboring states have all adopted defined safe passing. You can see them listed there. Most of them are at 4 feet instead of 3 feet. When you go into Vermont or you go into Massachusetts, you're going to see 4 feet signs. And most of them also include pedestrians, as we would like to. Vermont, who just adopted in July, they have a very, very progressive defined safe passing law. It doesn't just include pedestrians and cyclists. It also includes like people on horseback and people riding tractors. And I know especially in the Amish country, we would really like to incorporate people who are driving buggies, right? Because we know there's been an unfortunate number of accidents on that. We are also seeing local counties take action in their own hands because we're tired of waiting for the state. So Suffolk County on Long Island, Monroe County, which is Rochester, have already adopted their own 3-foot safe passing laws, and Albany County is looking at it right now. And that's never good, right? It's never good when you end up with a patchwork of laws across the state. So that's defined safe passing, which we are working on. There are 4 legislative priorities that we share with our friends at the Safe Streets Coalition and Families for Safe Streets. I know you guys are mostly not advocates, so I will try and do these relatively quickly, but I think they're important to know about what these priorities are. One is complete streets maintenance, which essentially requires the same kinds of complete streets consideration that we give for major projects to any maintenance project that's going to have a design life of more than 10 years, right? So if you're going to repave a road and it's going to last more than 10 years, please consider whether a little paint might make your pedestrians safer. Defined safe passing I've already talked about. Stop as yield, which some people also know as the Idaho stop, is a safety-oriented bill that allows cyclists as they approach a stop sign to evaluate the intersection and see if it's safe and clear, and if it is to pass through without coming to a complete stop and putting your foot down. And similarly, when you approach a stop light, you can treat that stop light as a yield, as a stop sign where you put your foot down, but you do not have to wait for the light to turn green. And there's very good evidence that this keeps everyone safer, because cyclists getting through and out of an intersection when nobody else is there is much safer than us being there when the truck comes and the truck is turning right and we're trying to go straight, and then we have a very bad situation. The fourth priority that I wanted to mention to you, which I think is a really interesting bill, and I'm really optimistic that we're getting traction on this, is called speed limiters for the most reckless drivers. We used to call it speed limiters for repeat speed offenders. This would require people who reached an insane, in my opinion, number of speeding tickets, like 10 speeding tickets in a year. All right. If you get 10 speeding tickets in a year, you're really a problem, right? If you reach that limit, it would be mandatory that you would have technology installed on your car that would prevent you from going more than 5 miles over the speed limit. This is parallel to what we already do with DWI folks, right? If you get 2 DWIs, you need to be, or DUIs, you need to have the breathalyzer put on your car, right? The interlock device. This is along those same lines. And I've driven the car that has the tech on it. It drives just like a regular car until you get 5 miles over the speed limit, and then you just put your foot on the accelerator and nothing happens. So it doesn't break or come to a sudden stop or anything. It just prevents you from going faster. This would only be applied to the worst of the worst. And there are truly worst of the worst people out there who are directly putting the rest of us at risk. And we're finding out who these people are because of the school zone speed cameras. Because school zone speed cameras do not require somebody to be pulled over, and they do not add points to your license. So you don't lose your license if you get a lot of school zone speed camera violations. You just have to pay some money. So if you're rich enough and you don't care about it, you can get an infinite number of these things. So in 2024 alone, New York City has had school zone speed cameras for a long time, so they have the best stats. 2 vehicles received more than 500 school zone speeding tickets. 500 tickets in a year each. That's crazy, right? Those people are a real menace to society. 132 vehicles received 100 or more tickets. 815 vehicles received 52 or more tickets. So you can see it's not very many people, but they're creating a disproportionate danger to the rest of us. So this bill is catching a lot of traction because it doesn't create economic challenges for people who believe they need their car to get where they're going, right? To get their groceries. They've made a lifestyle choice that requires them to drive everywhere because their house is far away from things. This would still allow them to drive to the grocery store, take their kids to school and soccer, and get to work, whatever it is that they need to do. They just have to do it at a pace where they're not putting the rest of us at risk. So those are our 4 legislative priorities. We have had some legislative changes recently that are success stories. Many of you are probably aware that Sammy's Law passed. Sammy's Law is a New York City specific law that allows New York City to drop down to 20 miles an hour, even lower than the 25 in selected streets. This bill was named after Sammy Cohen Eckstein. His mother was the founder of Families for Safe Streets. He was doing the same thing I have a 14-year-old son does all the time. Come home, drop your school books, pick up your soccer bag, and out you go. And a truck came around the corner much too fast and killed him. And he never made it to soccer. And so that bill was named after him, and it became part of the New York State budget a year ago to allow New York City to have some more local control of speeds. Smaller, but still important, 2023 Empire State, I think that should say 2024 Empire State Trail detour mandate. We now require that when something happens, if the trail gets closed, that they have to post a detour. That didn't used to be the case, and we had tourists come in to ride the trail. If there's no detour sign, you've never been there before, it's a really big problem when you're on a bike, because if you go the wrong way on a bike, it can be a long and difficult way to get back. School zone speed cameras are in individual communities. Obviously, Syracuse, I should have listed you guys, Kingston and Albany. But not every community got school zone speed cameras who had a bill. And I have not dug into why that is. That's something I really would like to dig into. And I'm interested in a statewide school zone speed cameras. I don't know why we have to go through this every single year with individual communities. And then the biggest one I want to talk to you about our recent successes was the 2022 local control of speed limits to 25 miles per hour. I'm sure all of you know that statutorily cities, the lowest you could go was 30. But now you can go to 25. And that is true in cities, villages, towns over 50,000 and suburban towns. And I want to talk just a little bit more about that. Hopefully I'm not going too far over time. So this is an area speed limit. It's not a street by street. You don't have to do a traffic study every single street. You're essentially redefining the 30 as 25. You can create exceptions. Most communities that have implemented 25 do have some exception streets. Obviously, the state roads are exceptions because they're still controlled by DOT. But even the locally managed roads, you can exempt some of usually it's like a wider out of the center of town area. I included the language there, but the important thing is that it's a doable thing for every community. It's not outrageously expensive. I suspect I'm preaching to the choir, but here are some of the ways we talk about why that's important. Obviously, slower is safer, especially for people who are outside of cars. Both fewer crashes because, of course, you can see more stopping time, better visibility, but also dramatically fewer fatalities. This graph comes from a literature review of 6 studies, and you can see that the exponential increase in pedestrian fatalities once you go over 25 miles per hour, right? It makes an enormous difference. So if people ask, what's the difference, 30 to 25, does it really matter? It really matters. It matters in keeping people alive when they have a bad interaction with a car. NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, already has it as a recommended default 25. And of course, it is or was a Federal Highway Administration proven safety countermeasure. Another interesting thing that I've been asked a lot because Albany just implemented 25 miles per hour is, well, they're not going to enforce it anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? I think all of us have been well versed in the line of thinking that in order to create change, we need to redesign our roads. Clearly, that's the best way, right? Well, roads that are not wide and open and intensely making you intensely desire to drive fast is better. No one is arguing that. But it is also true that dropping the speed limit really does change behavior. Boston did it in 2017. They went from 30 to 25 and they studied it. They're a big city with big resources and they studied the change. And what they found is that it slowed people down. The number of people exceeding 35 miles per hour dropped by 1/3, right? That's incredible. Just by putting up a sign, no other changes, no increased enforcement, no redesign, the number of people going over 35 dropped by 1/3. And remember, you've got this exponential growth problem. So 35 to 30 is a big change. It's a very beneficial change. 25 is better, but we'll take what we can get. So it is simply not true when people say, oh, but it won't change behavior. It does change behavior. The interesting thing is it's not designed to change behavior of those people who are running through your neighborhood at 50. That's not who this law is targeted at. It's targeted at us, regular drivers who drive a couple miles over the speed limit, right? Instead of going 32, you're going to go 27. And then if a kid runs in the road, you're less likely to kill them. And so it really, really does make a difference. 25 mile per hour communities. The law was signed October 12th, 2022. Lewiston, the village of Lewiston in Niagara County, they adopted it by September 6th. So the governor signed October 12th. Lewiston adopted September 6th. That was kind of impressive. Like that's some government action. We are up now to 15 municipalities so far. 6 of them are in Westchester, and the balance are sort of distributed around the state, but some concentration here in the capital region. We now are aware of 10 more that are in process, but have not yet adopted. So they have started talking about it. There's been news articles, there's some information, but they haven't been adopted yet. 6 of those are in the capital region, which is interesting. Why are so many in the capital region? And those of you who are part of the MPO will appreciate that the reason is because of MPO leadership. That is why. That is why you're seeing a bunch of capital region communities looking to do 25. So CRTC is developing a Vision Zero safety action plan, and they have included very specifically in their speed limits, and they are helping each community come up with the information they need to make a good choice about 25 miles per hour as part of that. We as a team, meaning New York Bicycling Coalition, Families for Safe Streets, that's the organization founded by Amy Cohen-Eckstein, and the New York Safe Streets Coalition that I co-chair with those folks, have been developing resources because we hear too many communities thinking, oh, I can't drop to 25 because it's expensive. I have to do this big traffic study. I can't do it. That is really not true. And so we have developed a whole set of resources for communities. There is an FAQ that answers all kinds of questions about what you need to do and how you do it. We have that list of municipalities that I just showed you, not just, but also in addition to the list, we have links to every engineering study, the minutes of the agenda where the change was adopted, and to the actual local law that was changed. We also did a session on this at the New York Bike Summit, and we've recorded that, and that's available on our website, as well as we have a webinar next Tuesday. So if you're interested in this topic, or if you want to share it with communities around, there is a webinar on this topic next Tuesday. And that webinar will include Matthew Carmody, who's an engineer, who was the engineer who supervised the work in the village of Mamaroneck, was one of the early adopters. Matthew Rowe, who works for Stantec, who was mentioned in one of your projects earlier. I don't know if he'll be working with you, but he is an excellent planner with a good pro-pedestrian, pro-cycling mindset. And he was very involved in writing the 11th edition of the MUTCD. So he really knows his stuff. He's a great person to have. For legal advice, we will have the Corporation Counsel from the city of Schenectady, who just adopted. So she's very well versed in the legal aspects. And then we will have a citywide elected official from Albany, Dorcia Pleers, talking about the political aspects and how to build coalitions to get this passed in your community. So that's happening on Tuesday, February the 4th at 4. And that, I think, is the end of my spiel on 25. But I really encourage people to think hard about it, because in most communities, it makes sense to do it. There's not really a reason not to. Then I wanted to run through quickly an Albany case study. A lot of this is going to be super familiar. I noticed this when I was presenting with Bren and with Kevin a couple of months ago, that you guys and we are doing a lot of the same things, just not necessarily at the same time in the same order. But as a resident of Albany, what I want to emphasize for you is that the culture here is changing. We had really a lawless culture around driving. It was very, very bad. And it's still not great. I'm not going to hold Albany up as like an exemplar of everything wonderful. We have a long way to go. But I no longer feel that people think that they are free to drive like a maniac wherever they want in Albany. It is shifting. And the combination of things that's causing it to change is automated enforcement, which I know you guys are moving towards. We have had red light cameras for a long time. Since 2015, we put in our first red light cameras. So those have been there. We're kind of used to automated enforcement now. We now have school zone speed cameras. That began just this year in 2024. And it has been amazing to watch the difference. People do not want to get those tickets. And now you actually know when you're in a school zone, which you couldn't tell before because people didn't even slow down at all. Like many communities that are older communities, our schools fall on these main drags that take people from, it's like a hub and spoke system, right? So downtown Albany, capital of the state, suburbs on the outside, lots of roads going in and out, and those big roads have schools on them. And you just couldn't tell that you were in a school zone, 40 miles an hour right on by. So now you can tell for sure when you're in a school zone. They did do a 30-day grace period with mailed warnings. They are only giving tickets if you go over 30. Right. So you're not, the speed limit's 20. You're going over 30 before you get a ticket, which has helped diffuse the complaining, because most people are like, you're going 10 miles over the speed limit in a school zone, just slow down. The other thing that's been very interesting and is not a surprise at all to me as a city resident is that 72% of the initial batch of tickets went to non-residents, primarily commuters. So those of us who live here said for a really long time, you're driving through our neighborhood as if you were on the highway. It's not the highway, it's our neighborhood. Please drive like it's a neighborhood. And sure enough, when the tickets came out, it was not, for the most part, Albany residents who are going 40 in a school zone. It is people trying to get to work and back. So that is, hopefully they're going to get smart and they're going to not go that fast anymore and not get their speeding tickets, because nobody wants to give people speeding tickets. We just want people to slow down. One driver got 29 school zone speeding tickets in the first couple of weeks. 29, one driver in the city of Albany. So that, again, speaks to the need for us to do something very specific about these worst of the worst offenders. The other thing we did is the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. It was adopted in July, I think, and effective January 1st, 2025. That has had an impact. People definitely are slowing down throughout the whole city. And it's also made the differential between the school zone and the not school zone much less. So it's reduced the complaining about the school zones a little bit. We, like you, it sounds, have done a lot with speed humps. They did do some evaluations. They did a small test with 4 streets and 25 humps. I have to figure that out. It seems like too many, but that's what they say. And they found 88% decrease in the number of people speeding on those streets. 88%, that's big. So then they put in a whole bunch of them on 20 new streets. It's very noticeable when you're driving in Albany. A lot of the sort of cut through streets that people were using to kind of get away from the arterials now have speed humps, and it's very good. We also have bus rapid transit. We're up to 3 main bus rapid transit lines. Our first one went in April 2011, and it is awesome to see the bus rapid transit really working. We have queue jumpers, and we have the tech on the bus that lets the bus sort of draft under the lights. And it's definitely made our bus system more pleasant to use and increased the number of people who are using it. It's been an interesting thing to watch because we also still have the sort of NIMBY people who don't want buses in their community. That is still a problem, but I think it's decreasing. So we'll see. And then finally, we are doing some major infrastructure changes like additional multi-use paths, additional bike lanes. They are mostly just paint. We don't have a lot of protected bike lanes in Albany, unfortunately. We do have some what we used to call road diets or lane reductions. We have lane narrowings. And then the 2 biggest problem streets that are still remaining are up in the next couple of years. The first one is Central Avenue, which if you've ever been to Albany, you may have dreaded walking, biking, or driving on Central Avenue because it is an absolute madhouse. That is Route 5. It takes you from Albany to Schenectady, and it's just a madhouse. It's terrifying. I don't like to drive on it, let alone ride my bike on it. Central Avenue is next, and then last is Washington Avenue. Washington Avenue is 2 lanes in each direction when parking on each side, and runs basically from downtown to the regional mall, the cross gates, and right by our single flagship urban high school. So we have a lot of pedestrian activity interacting with a lot of people driving too fast, and it's not good. So all of those things taken together have done good things for our city in terms of changing the culture. And I wanted to draw your attention, if you have not read it, to this report that I flagged here, which is called Fair Warnings, Recommendations to Promote Equity in Speed Safety Schools. Let me go back. School in speed safety camera programs. You should read it for other purposes as well. It's just some good practices about how to communicate with your community about upcoming changes and how to diffuse some frustrations. One thing I desperately wish Albany had done was to make clear how they were going to spend the money that they were going to receive from school zone speed camera tickets. Because if they had simply said this money is going to be set aside and we're only going to use it for this other purpose, let's say pedestrian improvements in front of schools would be a logical thing. It would have diffused a lot of the complaining that we hear from residents about it being a money grab by the city, which I never understand what that really means. Like the city's not a thing that wants to grab your money. They're just going to use that money to make your life better, but whatever. That is what people say. And so I think anything you can do to make clear how that money is going to be used and not just put it in the general fund is a good thing to do when you can. Okay, that brings me to the end of my, as quickly as I could do it, spiel. And I welcome the opportunity to talk with you and learn from you. And I will stop sharing for now, and then I can always share again if we need to. About it.
No, thank you so much for that. That was great. A lot of information for sure. And I know looking at the chat, there's some people who are hoping to get some more of that information, especially some of the safety resources that you talked about to kind of use at some of the local bike depots.
Yeah, I put that right in the chat.
Yeah, if you can put that in there, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
No worries.
All right. So is there
Let's see.
we're gonna open this up for questions and comments now.
Yep.
So if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to ask, you can either put them in the chat or raise your hand, either your virtual hand. Oh, yep, David.
David, yep, you got him. Okay.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. This has been a fantastic discussion here. Been really enjoying hearing some of these updates and just great presentations. So thanks for the opportunity. I know that I've been hearing speed humps have been a new treatment or a treatment that's been supported, and we're seeing some really great results. It's definitely a treatment that I've tried to that and speed cushions have tried to promote here. I'm in Rochester. I've tried to use the speed cushions as perhaps an alternative speed control because some communities and the emergency responders are a little hesitant to use the humps on especially emergency access routes. So I was wondering just if the cushions treatment has come up as a discussion point, the data behind it from what you might be seeing, and basically and also the speed humps. How has that been viewed from an emergency response perspective?
So the answer is I really don't know, and I would want to get you in touch with folks in the city to give you the best possible answer. I know that like every city, our first responders have a lot of influence over what we do as a city, and it's very unusual for us to do anything that does not incorporate their feedback. So I'm going with yes, they all agreed on this, but that is just based on my understanding of how the world really works. But I'd be happy to put you in touch with the traffic engineers in Albany so that you can find out why they made that choice, that design choice.
Okay, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do that. Do you want to maybe send me your email or something and I'll connect you?
Absolutely.
The other thing which I would love you to tell me about, which I just don't know the answer to, is some places, and I can ask our Albany folks too, but I have not had a chance to ask. Some places have a split speed hump with like a line in the middle. So it's like two speed humps, one on each lane. And as a cyclist, that's very handy, right? Because the wheel fits between those two. And in Albany, they did not do that. The speed hump crosses the double yellow. It's solid, which means when you're on your bike, you're going over the speed hump just like a car, which is, not the end of the world, but it is not as convenient. And I assume it's because the speed hump is more stable, like you have less water infiltration and less places where there's an issue of something happening, and so they probably made that design choice. But I haven't had a chance to ask. But a couple of cyclists have asked me, like, there's a split in the speed hump for my wheel, and this one doesn't. I was like, I don't know. People be happy the cars aren't trying to kill you, but I would.
So
thinking about that.
So I will say, I see that Kevin from the city dropped off here, but City of Syracuse has their speed cushion program going along. And they've been experimenting with different styles. They start off with just the one single speed bump across. They've been working with the emergency responders here to basically every iteration has been slightly different as they try different ones. So they have some of the ones that are split with one in each lane, and that's the idea is that fire truck can straddle it where like a normal vehicle can't, so they are not impeded on their speed. They've done one with three humps, three small humps across, and again, it's kind of trying to line up with the wheels of the emergency vehicles specifically. But they have a whole website. I think Danielle put it into the chat. They've been trying to keep track of that and post about some of their experiences with it. So that's just one resource from the City of Syracuse side.
That's great. Yeah, I was working in a community out here, a little village, and they actually the fire chief at the time came up to me and said, "Hey, I've looked at this. The speed cushion treatment seems like a good compromise with us." And I was like, "Great, you're doing half my job for me right now. You're coming up with a solution for me." So, yeah, that's exactly it. So, I appreciate that, and I'll follow up with you. Is it nybc.net?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and on that link I just posted there, it looks like there's a couple PDFs that have a review of each of the years that they've done this pilot program for the city. So that might be just something interesting. And if you need follow-up folks from Syracuse to chat with, we can get you those names too.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone.
I had a question about bike sharrows. It seemed like a really good idea 10 years ago, and the city has implemented them on quite a few streets in the city. What's the current thinking on sharrows? Are they a good idea or not?
Does Syracuse have a position on them?
Our bike plan included them.
I mean, we don't have anyone from the city on here. I know they're trying to, some of their more recent things are trying to use them along with other, kind of speed reduction, infrastructure. Not that, they're trying to get it as more of a companion piece, but I don't know their official policy off the top.
I mean, there is a feeling now that shares have the potential to make people feel safer than they are and entice people to places they might not otherwise ride. On the flip side, for those of us who are in this sort of like top couple of categories of confidence of riding with traffic, it is helpful to know that drivers see some sort of formal indication that you have a right to exist, because sometimes drivers forget that you have the right to exist. But you're right to wonder if they are not. And the best thing is separated bike lanes, right? We all know that would be the ideal thing, but it's also prohibitively expensive, especially when you're looking at the whole state, right? If you're trying to put a protected bike line from one community to another, protected bike lanes, that becomes very expensive. And that's one of the reasons that I think define safe passing, while not the same level of protection, we ought to at least tell drivers, give people space, because we're not, in my experience, going to build a protected bike lane for commuters from one community to another. We might as part of a trail project for recreational riders, and sometimes those can double up as commuting paths, but we just don't have the resources to put a protected bike lane every place we have a car. So we've got to figure out other ways.
One thing also from the city of Syracuse I know of is that they are just beginning an update to their bike plan, kind of trying to update it from where were they 10 years ago 12 years ago when the original bike plan was created, what has been completed, as well as trying to bring it up to date in terms of what new standards are. I know that's just really kicking off, so it's I don't know if they've even selected a consultant yet for it, but I know that's something that they're hoping to get started. Any other questions or comments? I know I've seen a couple things dropped into the chat about some upcoming cycle rides, the bike party at the end of the month, as well as the cycle in the city in May. And following bike party on social media. So I appreciate that. Oh, and Sarah Cruz. So I appreciate that, especially for anyone who's interested in cycling. Definitely go check out those events. Loie, yes.
Hi, this is not related to the presenter, but I just had a question about basically bike parking in downtown. It sounds like that has been heard, and I know that the Syracuse Urbanism Collective submitted a proposal for basically temporary stuff. Does it sound like there's going to be more permanent going in, or just directions to where there is permanent bike parking?
So in the downtown parking study that we're just completing, where there are some recommendations within there of some places that currently have space for additional bike parking, as well as near facilities that are underserved. Those conversations will have to occur between the city and they will be occurring between the city and downtown committee to kind of pursue some of those ideas. But
so they're just proposals right now, not like there's going to be stakes in the ground kind of thing anytime.
Yeah, they're just recommendations at this point that we hope that the city pursues, but ultimately anything within the city's public right of way is their decision.
Okay, good to know.
I just want to throw in on bike parking. One of the things that I'm hoping that some more New York communities will pick up on is a bike event parking and bike valet parking. City of Burlington.
That's something we run into with the bike party, I would say. Like we had to have people basically just standing outside the last location we landed at, or the December one, I think. So wherever they want a bike party to land, which is 20 to 30 cyclists, usually, bike racks are welcome.
In Burlington, what they've done is Vermont is much smaller than New York, so they have their statewide organization is called Local Motion, and it's kind of like a combination state and Burlington bike coalition, and they run a bike valet program. And it is, to my best understanding, mostly funded by the city out of the city events budget. They contract with a Local Motion. Local Motion built, and I can be happy to put you in touch with the guy who runs that program. He's very awesome, and he very much loves his bike racks. Some very inexpensive event bike racks. And then they have staff. They don't use volunteers. They might have some volunteers, but there's always a paid staff member. Brings them, sets them up for, if you know Burlington, you know there's a lot of street activity during the good months.
Yeah, I think I've seen something similar with Slow Row Buffalo. I mean, they have a huge amount of cyclists, so they did the temporary sort of pop-up bike racks and then
Exactly. But the nice thing about the way they did it in Burlington is that they have it is a revenue neutral, at least, effort for the not-for-profit. Because it's paid for out of the city event budget as a contract. They do it for other agencies also. We actually paid them to come to the New York Bike Summit. I thought in my foolhardy naivete that I would be able to borrow event bike racks from someone around the capital region. I was like, some triathlete group will loan me their racks. No, not in the second week of October, they won't, because they're using their racks. So I contracted with Local Motion, and they just brought their bike racks from Burlington to Albany, which is not that far, and set them up, and also ran a little class on how to do bike valet in a way that is sustainable over time. So I thought it was a really interesting model, and I hope that folks around the state will pick it up, because we do need more bike parking, permanent bike parking, but we also need event parking, because we shouldn't have in Rochester at the Lilac Festival. I hope you have more bikes there than you do on a regular day, right? So you don't necessarily need permanent bike parking.
Oh yeah, because things for like Pride and things like that would be really great too.
Right. So yeah. I'm kind of pitching, hoping to find not-for-profits that would like to learn how they're doing it in Burlington, and see if they can reach some agreement with their local event folks to help fund it, because it would be just great. We should have it everywhere.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know about some of those things. So that's very helpful to know about. Any other comments, questions that we've got?
What about electric bikes and electric scooters? Are any issues with them sharing the lanes with bikes?
Electric bikes and electric scooters, I'm curious to know how things are happening in Syracuse. So I'd be interested in your opinions. In New York City, we have some very, very serious problems. And it's essentially the combination of economic necessity and e-mobility devices. So a lot of delivery is being done by e-bikes. New York City also allows for these class 3 e-bikes, which are bigger, heavier, faster. They're not permitted in the rest of the state. Class 2, 1, and 2 are permitted in the rest of the state, but class 3 is only permitted in New York City. And the bad behavior by mostly by delivery folks, but I'm sure there's others too, of riding these heavier vehicles on the sidewalk is creating some really bad vibes against cyclists of all kinds. It's really not helpful to me as I'm trying to pass statewide legislation when people are fearful when they step out of their apartment building in Lower Manhattan that they're going to get run over by an e-bike. So there's a lot of things that are happening. New York City has had an interest in an e-bike registration law, which is just, I understand why people think that might work, but it's really hard to see how it could work, since there's no mechanism. It's essentially like a license plate for an e-bike, but there's no mechanism for that, because DMV, state DMV doesn't run license plates for e-bikes. They don't do that. They only do license plates for motor vehicles. So New York City would have to come up with a whole new bureaucracy for that. And then what about me when I come to New York to ride, because I'm going there as a tourist? What are you going to do about me? Am I going to have a license plate, a temporary license plate? I'm going to have to, it doesn't really make sense, but it is a problem. And Albany, specifically, we are seeing more e-mobility devices of various unclear kinds and more bad behavior. These are folks for the most part who are riding because they don't have a car and it's convenient to ride, and they are riding poorly, wrong side of the street, sidewalk, misbehaving. So when
I was in New York recently, the only vehicles that seemed to never obey the traffic rules were the electric delivery e-bikes.
So there's some interest in doing something with the delivery apps, making it more of a delivery app responsibility, because it's not really fair to the folks who are living in the gig economy life to make this a very expensive thing that they have to do. So it's, they're trying to make a living, and the delivery apps don't pay enough. So the more deliveries they can make, the better closer they are to making the living. So it is a real problem in New York City, and I fear that it's going to be an increasing problem in Syracuse, Albany, Rochester, Buffalo, in the metropolitan areas outside of the major metro. I don't know if I answered your question, but these are this is the reality we're living with, and we're going to have to deal with it. So yeah. The e-bike law in New York has a lot of crazy things in it. Like, you're not allowed to ride an e-bike on any road that's more than 30 miles per hour. So that means if you live in a village in New York State, you basically might as well, like, your e-bike is not actually useful for transportation, right? Because by the time you get to the downtown, you're on. If you try and go from one village to the next, the road is 45 or 50, so you can't actually legally ride your e-bike. Nobody seems to be enforcing that right now, but it is the law. The other thing that's weird about the e-bike law is there's a lot of local control of the e-bike world. Like, every municipality can make their own laws, and they can say, you can ride an e-bike in the village of Messina, but you can't ride an e-bike in the village of Messina on Tuesdays between 7 and 12. They can just make that law. They can do whatever they want, which, if you're a tour operator trying to ride a tour through New York State, is really a problem. I get calls from time to time like, can I bring e-bikes on this route? And I'm like, I have no idea. You'll have to call every single municipality that you're crossing through and see if they have implemented an e-bike specific law. Or you can just roll through and hope you don't get caught, which is fine if you're an individual person. But would you run a bike tour where people are paying you to do that, running the risk that you're going to roll into a town and they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, no e-bikes here because it's Saturday? So it's a problem.
Any other comments? Danielle, you started saying something earlier, but oh no.
No, I was just going to point out that I dropped that website into the chat, that Vermont program, that local motion valet bike parking.
Thank you.
Just for sure thing. Thank you.
Yeah, the guy who runs that is named Stu. Can't remember his last name, but he is very awesome. And man, he loves to talk about his program. So you will learn a lot if you reach out to him.
Good.
No, I think that's a great program. I would
Very
love
cool.
to see something like that started around here.
Yeah. And
especially with the Empire State Trail, and I know they do the big tours that go all along the length of it. So it'd be nice to provide more of that when we know those are going on.
Exactly, because it doesn't have to take up space all the time. Like, it is there should be permanent bike parking. Don't hear me say no permanent bike parking, but just like you have, you need to deal with events. Events are a different thing. And event bike parking is great. And it makes people more willing, especially in the days of e-bikes, to ride their e-bike to the event because they know it will be safe. E-bikes are expensive. And if you ride your e-bike to downtown Albany and you do not have a really good lock, you're probably not riding your e-bike home, right? So bring your e-bike, and having it parked with a valet so that you know that your bike is secure. That's probably one less car on the street on the way to the event.
Yeah, it adds that peace of mind for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Peter?
Just to briefly, as I wrote in the chat, my experience with the VO share bike program, I mean, it seems in some respects a great program. It provides auto alternative in Syracuse for a lot of people who can't afford it. And I don't want to pour water on that, but at the same time, in my personal usage, I find it's frustrating because you have it charges you by the minute, and so you have this immediate incentive to go as fast as possible somewhere and take as many quick shortcuts and so on. And so I think for Vision Zero, might consider is there, and I don't know, but just wondering if there's another alternative to by the minute, such as by the distance.
I actually don't know anything about that, but it seems perfectly logical to me.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, and I've had the same thoughts at times on the VO scooters a little bit. But I don't know their policies. I don't know the policies of at a lot of the other bike share and scooter share programs. So I think that's something that'd be interesting to look into and know what everyone else is using and if the distance-based model is viable.
I don't know
know,
anyone who's doing it that way. I've ridden bike share in a lot of places and it's always been by the minute. So that's really interesting.
yeah, I wonder if there is any program that's running based on distance instead of time. I know that their distances on the VOs, I think Kevin had previously said that the average distance for a ride is about 1.4 miles, which is not that long, but that's also a realistic, that's most of our commutes are very short commutes or very short trips to a nearby store, to the park, etc. So yeah, I don't know if that's viable or not for them financially, but it'd be interesting to look into.
I looked it up in the question of the 25 mile per hour speed limit. The average car ride in the United States is 6 miles. That's the average overall. And that includes people who are riding, 20 miles to get to the grocery store because they live in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is so compelling because when you do the math, even if you were doing a straight shot and there were no traffic lights and no congestion and no pedestrians and no turning, that would only save you, it only hurts you by 1.1, little less than a minute and a half, right? So you go 6 miles at 25 instead of 6 miles at 30, and it reduces the chances you're going to kill someone. That seems like a win to me. But some people feel that they want to get where they're going as fast as possible.
Yeah. All right. If there's not any other questions, I think we're kind of getting ready to wrap up. Again, thank you, Anne, for presenting and all the great information you've been able to provide us. Thank you to our member agencies for their updates. We are open to ideas for our next forum, which will probably be in it's March, so probably April or May. I forget. I think we're on like a 3-month calendar for this. I forget. So if there's any ideas, always feel free to let us know. Otherwise, we've got a couple ideas in the back of our minds for upcoming meetings. Where can we get the recordings? This will be posted to our YouTube page.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Once we finish recording, it'll be posted. Should be posted sometime tomorrow. That you can come back to at any point. I know Anne's shared a lot of really great links that will be in there. And we'll save this chat as well, just so that we have some of those links ready to go as well. All right. Other than that, thank you all for your time this afternoon, and I hope you all have a great day.